I should probably start out by telling you that I was never planning to write a book, at least not when I was at Harvard. So you sort of think of somebody writing a book like this, sitting in the middle of the quad with like a fountain pen and like some moleskins and like filling up pages of notes, but that wasn't how that happened. For me, on Easter Sunday in 2015, the idea came to me like, I wish I could say it was like at brunch or maybe at mass or some like inspired point, but it was at the end of the day. I was in the shower, and this idea just like seized me with such fervor that I jumped out of the shower, threw on a robe, suds in hair, and ran across my house to my computer and started typing out madly like everything I could think about for the book. So the title was already there, How I See Catholic Harvard, that Peter Kraft would write the foreword, that Ignatius Press would publish it, that, and then 38 of the 40 tips for faithful college students. So more or less, like, the Holy Spirit, like, gave me this book, and then the energy to do it. So I was sitting there Easter Sunday night, typing away, suds in hair. Dad comes into the room and he's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Well, I'm gonna write a book." And he was like, "Don't you have not better things, but don't you have stuff you should be doing?" And that's probably true, since I was in my first year of master's degree at Oxford. So I went to Harvard, I graduated in 2014. I was a Rhodes Scholar. I went and studied theology at Oxford for 2 years. So I just finished that and have been helping to promote the book. I started up a management consultant gig in January in Dallas. Okay, so a couple more funny things about the way that this book came together, because it's just very surprising in some ways. So, like I said, the idea had come together that it was going to be Peter Kraft who was going to write the foreword, and he's been like an intellectual hero of mine for some time. I've gotten to know him fairly well over the past, say, 5 years. I've been like stuck in a car in traffic with him. I've lost a ping pong game to him, like barely. And but I still get really nervous when I talk to him. Like, I still have to like write down all of my conversation topics for when I talk to Peter Kraft. So I was gonna pitch him the book. I really wanted him to write the introduction, but I was super nervous. I was sitting across from him at this conference in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and was sort of stealthily trying to read off my phone and the points I was gonna try to make to him. And I get stumbling through this pitch, and he looks at me. He's kind of saintly, but also rather taciturn. So he looks at me and he's like, "I'll do it if it's good enough." So he tells me to follow up in 2 weeks, and I follow up in 3 days. And I'm like, "So he thought about it more," and he sends me back a fully written draft of the foreword. So that was just incredible. And the other thing that came to me as like part of the idea for the book, but I had no idea how difficult it really was to make this happen, was getting Ignatius Press to publish it. So I didn't have any friends in publishing. I'm not really an author, or definitely was not. And my dad wanted me to go up to Napa with him for Mass and lunch with Cardinal Schoenborn last summer. And we're based in LA, so like that's a really far way to go for like a lunch. It's like a 6-hour drive. But it was my dad, so I was like, okay, I'll go. And we get in the car, we go up, and I'm waiting after Mass and before lunch with the Cardinal, and strike up a conversation with a complete stranger. So we have a great conversation. I get to the end of it, and we're like, "Oh yeah, by the way, we haven't introduced ourselves. So I'm Aurora." And he says, "Great, I'm Mark Bromley, president of Ignatius Press." I said, "Okay," I lost no time. I was completely shameless in my pitch. I was like, "I wrote a book for you." And I sent him the manuscript, had a contract a couple weeks later. So here we are. The book, it's really fun to like come back to the stories of how the book originated, because it's so clearly not from me and like my plans. It's so clearly like something that the Holy Spirit is wanting to get out there. It's been a real blessing to be a cooperator and be able to like deliver that message, but I very much feel like this is God's project, or whatever He wants to do with it. So let me tell you a little bit about the content of the book. There are 3 points that I like to make with it, and the first is that you can stay Catholic no matter where you go to college. You can do it at Harvard, you can do it at Princeton, you can do it at a state school, you can do it at a Catholic school. It just as losing your faith, if you go to, just as keeping your faith if you go to a Catholic school, that's not necessarily going to happen, that's not a foregone conclusion. Just so going to a secular school doesn't mean that you're going to lose your faith. So I'm trying to get that message out there to people whose families are nervous about them going to secular schools. Because we need people at schools like Harvard and Princeton we need people at Catholic schools who can get the formation and be developed and speak within the Catholic community. And we also need people who can come places like here and be witnesses, right? To be light, to be salt and light to campus like this. The second point I like to make is that being Catholic never took away from my college experience. It only ever added to it. So all of those things that people say that you get out of being Catholic at school, these things came to me because all of the things that people say you get out of like a college experience, these things came to me because of my faith and never in spite of it. And then the third point I want to make is that it's just practical. So this book, I'm grateful to be able to be at Princeton and talk to you about some of the struggles that are particular to schools like ours, but it's not actually, how I stayed Catholic at Harvard, it makes some people nervous sometimes because it's like, oh, it's Harvard, like does that apply to me if I don't go somewhere like here? Well, yeah, I mean, Harvard is meant to like get some attention, but it's not, it's practical advice. It's down-to-earth advice for like really anybody like on any college campus. You can't get too basic in the spiritual life. You come back to the things that are true, you come back to the sacraments and the same practices, and you grow in the depth with which you practice them and the love with which you practice them. Okay, so I want to tell you a couple stories, a couple of the best stories of the book, but you're still going to have to pick up the book for to get the rest of them. The first one is related to this point that you can be Catholic anywhere you go to school. So probably the best place where I learned this, somewhat unexpectedly, was when the Satanists tried to have a black mass at Harvard. So I don't know if you guys remember this, but a couple of years ago, so it was my senior year, it was my final week of finals. I was studying, like one does around final exam time at a school like this. And I was going from the library back to my dorm, and I saw this poster with like a picture of Satan on it. And I was like, this is really out there, like even for Harvard, like this is pretty far gone. It was advertising a satanic black mass, so they were going to steal a host from the local Catholic church, they were going to do horrible things to it, and that's, I guess, in a way what you would expect if you think of somewhere like Harvard. You're like, yeah, of course they're devil worshippers. But actually what you maybe wouldn't expect was the response. Immediately there were student leaders who were going back and forth over email chains about how we could get enough media attention, please find it, enough media attention to get this thing stopped. So, corresponded with the chaplaincy, and their idea was getting a Eucharistic procession and holy hour, like in reparation. They didn't want to actually get involved in getting it stopped, but they were going to do that, and that was great. But the students really wanted it not to happen in the first place. How can we get these devil worshippers to go away? So we wrote op-eds, we wrote letters to deans, and the biggest thing we did was a petition. So the petition at the end of the day got about 100,000 signatures. It went viral. It was huge. So the morning of that the Black Mass was actually supposed to happen, we were trying to get the petitions to the president of Harvard. So we printed them out in a big stack like this, and it was decided that I would present them to the president because I had been president of the Catholic Student Association. I had founded a sorority at Harvard. I had done a bunch of stuff that positioned me well to talk to her. So I wrote the cover letter, I put on a suit, I was ready to go tell her, why I was so important, she should listen to me, she should get this canceled, big stack of petitions. And I showed up in her office, and she didn't come to work that day. So it's so embarrassing, and also my family again, ever so supportful. They were like, "So didn't you have like better things to be doing? Like weren't you supposed to be studying?" And that's how I felt at that moment. I was like, I just wasted all of this time. I was supposed to be studying for exams. Instead, I was writing petitions and letters and refreshing the internet page, seeing how many had signed the petition. And in the end, I was like, wow, like that really didn't do anything. So I was standing in Harvard Yard, looking like a complete idiot, and that's when the news camera showed up. So all of a sudden, I was the person who looked like I knew what I was doing. And I started giving interviews throughout the day. I gave radio, TV, newspaper interviews, and I was finally getting back to all of that homework that my family wanted me to do, and I got a call on my cell phone. Aurora? Yes. This is Fox News. We want you to get in the black car outside your apartment. So I did. And lived to tell about it. I wasn't like kidnapped by Satanists. Like here we are. But I got in the car. I went to the suburbs of Boston and appeared on national TV with Greta Van Susteren. So it's funny because Greta kept on asking me, so where have all the Satanists gone? Like what? They're not planning to have Black Mass on campus anymore. Where did they go? And I was like, I don't know. For some reason, the Satanists haven't kept me in the loop about their plans. So I came back from the interview. The car pulled into the parking lot at St. Paul's, which is where the Holy Hour was happening, and a group of people surrounded the car. It was like they were like wearing all black and like weird like face makeup, and they were looking extremely angry. It was the Satanists. It was because their thing not only had been moved off campus, but had been canceled. So I don't know if they had like planned on finding me, or again I was just like the one in the suit, like looking like I knew what I was doing, or what the deal was. But they came and they surrounded the car and were like hissing these like threats at me. So fortunately at the time I was dating this like buff Cuban law student who like pushed them out of the way, and we made our way up to the Holy Hour. It was a really incredible thing actually, because there were like 5 or 6, wackos basically at Harvard Cultural Studies Club who wanted to like invite in these Satanists to do this ceremony to be nasty to Christians. And they got a lot more than they were bargaining for, because real Satanists from the Satanic Temple of New York showed up, and they were, real weirdos. And the actual result was that there wasn't any Black Mass, but there were thousands of people around the world praying, and there were thousands of people in the streets of Boston publicly adoring the Eucharist. So the point that I'm trying to make with that story is that at a place like Harvard or Princeton or any of these other schools, you're going to meet a lot of people that are indifferent to the faith, people that are unaware of the faith, people like who hate what they think the faith is, but don't actually, hate the faith. They don't know. You're going to meet people who are hostile to the faith, and maybe even a handful of devil worshippers. But you're also going to meet a really great community of people that are willing to stand up for their faith when it really counts. And anyway, that was very much my experience. The second point I'd like to make is that everything that was positive about my college experience, everything that people say is most important came to me through my faith. So I think that this is demonstrable in a number of different ways, but the best story I have for this has to do with winning the roads. So the whole application process, it's a very deep process, and every step of it, I had to make a decision about, like, am I going to be honest about who I am, which is pretty Catholic, or am I going to try to make myself into sort of a shiny secularist that believes in everything from the New York Times editorial board? And there was no hiding it, really. Like, if you looked at my CV, it was like, church. So there wasn't getting around who I was, really, but I was unashamed of it pretty much completely. There are 8 recommenders, so you have to get 8 people who are like, this is the best person I've ever met. 4 of them were Catholic professors. Then you have to get you have to write an essay about like your hopes and dreams, what defines you, what motivates you, why should we give you 2 years of funding to Oxford, and all of that again was about like stuff that I experienced through my Catholic faith. So I was very surprised when they invited me to be a finalist. I was told that that was impossible, including by my recommenders. They were like, sure, we're happy to write letters, but like, you don't really stand a chance. You know that, right? I didn't really think that I did. So I was invited to interview. I had to fly out to California from Boston, and they put us in this like fancy law firm. And they make it sort of as psychologically traumatic as possible. So they're like 15 finalists, they put you in a conference room, they interview you one by one, and it's like 8 former scholars talking to you. And they can ask you about anything they want. So we can talk about some of the questions that they asked me later, but I was, they were trying to get me off my game and ask me things that were going to like upset me or like make me defensive about the church. And really like the Spirit guided my answers, because like they would like say something that was like off-putting and I'd just like make a joke and it would be like diffused. So we got to the end of the interview and they're like, okay, well, we like you, but we're not really inclined to give this award to somebody so religious. We don't want you to use your religion or use this award to like promote your religion. I was like, well, I probably would do that. So, and like, here we are. But I finished with the interview. They put you back into that room with like 15 other candidates, and you're trying to talk about anything but the Rhodes Scholarship. So naturally, one thing leads to another. They Google me, and we talk about abortion, like me versus the room. And I think maybe they had like a secret camera. Who knows? I said they didn't, but I think maybe they did, because they came and they pulled me out for a second interview, like in the middle of this debate. So they pull me back into the hot seat, and there are 8, the 8 scholars are there again. They say, all right, you're on President Bush's Bioethics Commission. It's the year 2000, and you need to make a decision about embryonic stem cell research. And this was like such a difficult moment for me. I wish I could say like I'm just like holy enough that it was so easy. I was like, oh no, that's bad. But it was, I had to like think about it. I was like, so this is the thing that I want most in the world. And if I tell them I'm against embryonic stem cell research, they're gonna think I'm like a religious fanatic who's like getting in the way of legitimate medical research. But on the other hand, I was just in the room with all my other candidates defending the sanctity of life. So I did make the right decision. I did tell them that I didn't think that embryonic stem cell research was an ethical thing to do, that I wouldn't support it if it came across my desk. And they looked at me with these sort of blank expressions, and I walked out of the room. They came in a few minutes later, so 15 people waiting. They're like, you and you, they pointed at me. Everybody was like, everybody cried. I think that just happens every time, but like everybody just like cried. And really, the surprise of it all has only increased over the last 2 years as I've gotten to know my fellow peers who won the Rhodes, because we have such completely different worldviews. Later on, I met up with one of the people who was on my committee, and she was like, she's probably the scariest interviewer, but she was super nice to me when I met her in Oxford. And she told me, look, we knew what you were supposed to say, or like what we thought you would say based on what you told us you believed through your Catholic faith. We knew that you were supposed to defend embryonic stem cell research. And I said, but then why'd you choose me? She said, we're not the morality police. Like, we want to make sure that you're willing to stand up for what you believe in. So I'm not trying to say that, love Jesus and defend your views and you're going to win Rhodes scholarships, because I think that there are times when God calls us to sacrifice for our faith in real ways. But for me, the people that I met, both sort of friends and professors, and the community that I had, the leadership experience I had, the worldview that anchored who I was, all of these things that went into this Rhodes application and defined my college experience came through my faith. So the last thing I want to say is that this book is practical. It's not that I think that there are these moments that everybody thinks like defines your life because they're dramatic, they make great stories, people are excited about them, they get you on national TV, but they aren't, I don't think, looking back on my life, that those are actually the things that define me. I think that who I am comes from those daily practices of faith that I did sort of in those years leading up to those moments, like when nobody was looking. The habit of daily mass, the habit of just being with our Lord in the Blessed Sacrament, the Rosary, all of these things went up and prepared me to take a stand when it counted. So I encourage students, the best thing that you can do is not necessarily like write the op-eds or get the attention or make sure that you have like lots of people coming to your events, but it's going to Mass, it's getting to know our Lord, it's investing in that relationship. And that ultimately is going to give you the freedom and the strength that you need to be effective even at a place like Princeton.